Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Strong Stoic Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Tumblin. This episode, unlike many of the Strong Stoic episodes, is a feely-goody episode, mostly. I'm going to talk about friendship. But not just friendship in general, because that would be kind of boring, right? But rather, I did an episode on friendship back in the good old days, not so long ago. I think it was 176 or something like that, so it wasn't that long ago. So that episode is not boring. But rather today I want to talk about just how magical it can be. And I know that word, magical, you might think, oh, well, magic's not real, right? I don't use that term lightly. I really mean this. And because the things that friendship is able to transcend and overcome are truly magical. There's no other word for it. It's remarkable. You and I could be from different parts of the world, have different skin colors, be different heights, and even speak different languages, and we could still become friends. This podcast is supported by Patreon supporters. So if you would like to support this podcast, consider checking out my Patreon at Brandon Tumblin. Also check out my Telegram group chat where you can join in on the discussion with other strong Stoics. And my articles are on Medium and the Stoic Gym. Finally, consider checking out my newsletter on Substack. You get the episodes emailed directly to you as they come out along with my other work. There has, of course, always been some level of racism in human existence. This is bigotry. Make no mistake. It's a terrible thing. But there's actually an evolutionary reason for this. You see, for most of our human experience, for most of our human history, we've lived in tribes of about 150 people. And because resources were scarce, tribes were often at war with each other. One of the ways in which we distinguish friend from foe is if they look similar to us, if they wear similar tribe colors, if they speak similarly to us, if they have similar accents or languages, what we wear, and sometimes skin color. In any case, there's this mechanism, this psychological mechanism that says, is this person similar to me? Yes, it's part of my tribe. He or she is part of my tribe. If no, maybe I should be a little suspicious. Now, just to be clear, absolutely crystal clear, I am in no way making a moral judgment here. That is, just because something exists in our psychology or has existed in our human history, it doesn't mean that it's moral. It doesn't mean that it's ethically correct. There's a lot of behaviors and feelings that we have that we actually deem immoral. As an example, hate and resentment. You could argue that these are natural. You could very well argue that feeling bitter and angry is a natural feeling, but is it good? Is it moral? Is it ethical? It doesn't really seem to be the case. So we have the ability to discern between good and bad as it comes to things like character, things like, bitterness and resentment, emotions, feelings, and so on. Likewise, a proclivity to be hesitant towards outsiders, towards people that appear different to us, it could be viewed as natural. There's a psychological mechanism there, but that doesn't mean that those feelings are ethical. In fact, I'm making the contrary case. That's why Stoics preach this so much, that there's a union between all of us, between all of humanity and all of the universe. If we all naturally felt aligned with each other and felt unity and connection with everyone, well, maybe we wouldn't even need a philosophy like Stoicism to tell us that. Luckily for us, our reason is very powerful. That's what makes us human. It's our higher cognitive functions. Using our rationality, using our reason, we can transcend these natural proclivities that are simply unethical. We can do it with laziness, forcing ourselves off the couch. We can do it with food, understanding that if we eat chips every night, we're going to have some health problems sooner rather than later. And we can do it with racism and discriminating thoughts. We can recognize the connection between all of us and overcome those feelings. And what's the best way to recognize the connection between all of us? By connecting with others. In other words, by making friends. Daryl Davis is a black American who has actually converted members of the KKK to being no longer racist, to being no longer part of the organization. You heard that right. A black man who KKK members inherently hate was able to convince KKK members to give up their cloaks. Every now and then you come across a story, a real story, something that actually happened that doesn't seem to be real. It doesn't seem like it could possibly be true. Like, how the hell could that story be real? It has to be a fairy tale. But no, this is actually a true story. Daryl Davis was a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience twice. I highly recommend those episodes. In fact, the first time he was on is one of my favorite, probably my top 10 Joe Rogan Experience episodes ever, which is saying a lot because that guy releases so many podcast episodes. So if you like this episode, for sure, definitely check that out. But Daryl Davis, he requested an interview with a KKK national leader, a national leader. He had some experience with racism as a kid and really just wanted to find an answer to the question, in his words, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? It's crucial to understand here, crucial, that Daryl was chasing his curiosity. He wasn't an activist. He wasn't necessarily trying to convert KKK members. He wasn't trying to yell at them and call them racist. He was simply curious. He was trying to understand how anyone could hate anyone else when they didn't even know them. So, what his curiosity allowed him to do, his genuine curiosity, is be detached from anything that a Klan's member would say. That's classic Stoic detachment. How could what they are saying affect him, after all, if they didn't even know him? That was his thought pattern. That's a rational perspective. Oh, someone hates me. But if they don't even know me, why am I upset that they hate me? Because clearly their perspective, their opinion, is not based on facts because they don't even know the facts. The fact being who I am. As a brief comment here, just imagine how different our world would be if we all shared in that perspective. How much less offended we would be and how much less upset we would be towards each other if we carried that perspective, the same perspective as Daryl Davis. Anyways, I won't steal his entire story because it's truly remarkable. He did a TED Talk on it as well. If you want to check that out, it's about 20 minutes. But long story short, he began the process of befriending this man after the interview. That's the KKK national leader. He would come over to Daryl's house and have dinner with him. Think about how crazy that is. Eventually, meaning years later, this is a long process, the KKK leader would invite Daryl to his house to come and have dinner with him. And he invited him to KKK rallies. That's right. A black man went to KKK rallies on invitation from a national leader of the KKK. Eventually, as was bound to happen, the KKK leader turned in his robe and denounced them. What did Daryl do here? It's rather ingenious and speaks to today's topic. Daryl used the magic of friendship to transcend bigotry. Remember how I said at the beginning that some stories just seem way too crazy, way too fairy tale-like to be real? Well, that's real. That actually happened. That actually happened. This isn't some fairy tale bullcrap. Friendship can literally transcend psychological bigotry and racism. It's not some Disney movie. This actually happened. It's crazy. I lived in Quebec City for about 2 years. And when I was there, I spoke only broken French. I still speak somewhat, mostly broken French, let's be honest here. The French and the English relations in Canada are mostly good now. It's peaceful, but there are some barriers there still. For one, the French and the British back in the day, meaning French, fought over Canada. For those who don't know, there was basically this fight over who took over Canada between mostly British and French. The British eventually claimed dominion over the country, but there remained in Canada a very large French-speaking population, and in fact, it's still about a third of our population, so it's a considerable amount. Hence, there was always a bit of a barrier between French Canadians and Anglo Canadians, and this was exacerbated by the politics, of course, as most things are. The French Canadians did have to fight for a while to keep their language rights. So with that background knowledge, you'd think that an English person such as myself moving to Quebec would result in some tense relationships. You'd think that. That makes sense. But no, that wasn't my experience at all. It didn't matter, at all. What mattered is that whoever I was talking to had some decent, some respect, some human decency towards me, and I had the same amount, an equal amount, towards them. If there was even a hint of either of us wanting to laugh at the other person for making a language mistake, pronouncing something wrong, or having terrible grammar, or if there was resentment that manifested as anger, it simply wouldn't work. Those things don't exist in friendships. They can't. But none of that mattered. None of that, those grammatical errors, pronunciation errors, sometimes just flat out using the wrong word, none of that mattered given that there was mutual respect between us. But it's even more than that. I didn't realize this until I actually started to learn French more, but a lot of things in one language doesn't translate to the other language, as you would think. Sometimes the way you say something in English, for example, actually comes off as rude in French. As an example, if you say, "I appreciate you," in English, that's something you normally say. It's a very sweet thing to say, and you would normally say it to a close friend, or maybe your partner. "I appreciate you." It's a genuine, beautiful, sweet thing to say. In French, if you say the equivalent, "Je t'apprécie," it normally means, "I appreciate you, but ... So while you're speaking broken languages to each other, the chances are very high that one of you or both of you are probably going to say something that doesn't come off right. It may even come off as rude. But again, with some mutual respect and understanding, our reason allows us to transcend the initial emotional response that we have that says this person is being rude to me, and rather continue the conversation in peace. I made some very good friends from doing this. Now, I barely think about grammar and word pronunciation when I speak with a non-native English speaker or even an English speaker. I don't think about it. I focus on what they are trying to say versus what they actually might be saying literally. If you find yourself having a prejudice towards someone, feeling hatred towards anyone at all, try simply befriending them. If it's a group, befriend a member of the group. Try sitting down and talking with them, respecting them, calling people racist and bigots, even though it may be true, only makes the relationship worse. If someone is truly a racist, how do you think they're going to react to being called a racist? Do you think that's going to have any positive effect whatsoever? First of all, you're demonizing them and labeling them. Nobody likes to feel that. And second, if they are actually racist, they're probably happy to be called so. So you're giving them a compliment in their eyes. It literally doesn't make any positive difference whatsoever to just go up to someone that you deem racist and call them a racist? And this is the question that we have to ask ourselves. You could argue it's the Stoic question when you're interacting with the world. Are my actions, are my words pro-social? Am I sowing connection and construction, or am I sowing destruction, hatred, bigotry, antisocial behavior? I have one more brief story for you. Non-nerds are free to leave now, but it is quite brief, and I think you would like to hear the closing words of this episode. I would hope so. In The Lord of the Rings, there's an elf and a dwarf, Legolas and Gimli, who start off the story hating each other. Classic. They hate each other, not because of what they, as individuals, have done to each other, but rather for what their people did, meaning elves and dwarves, have done to each other in the past. Group hatred, racism, bigotry. The dwarf and the elf, they agree to go on a journey together for a higher purpose, to serve a higher goal. Of course, it's not just them two. There's other companions involved as well. And between the long journey, between walking, hiking, fighting together, cooking and eating together, sleeping next to each other, they became friends. Now, they were each unique in the group. There's only one elf and there's only one dwarf. But they became friends through spending time together, through realizing that they had more in common than they had different, and that ultimately they have the same goal. At the final battle, where the odds of them surviving were astronomically slim, Gimli the dwarf mutters to Legolas, the elf, "I never thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf." And Legolas, the elf, asked him, "What about side by side with a friend?" I could do that. We're all different. We have different skin colors, different strengths, different weaknesses, different accents, different languages. We have different heights, different weights, eye colors, hair colors, everything. It's amazing the amount of uniqueness that we have as human beings. But when you meet someone and you realize that you both have a lot more in common than you do different, you no longer see them as black or white or French or English or elf or dwarf. You only see them as a friend. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Consider leaving a rating and review wherever you're listening to this. It really does help out the podcast. If you're new here, episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm on all the social medias. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to join the Telegram group chat. Join in on the discussion. No more bugging today. Thanks again. Cheers. Until next time.